Amen. Thank you, Rachel. Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Mark, one of the pastors here on staff. Scott McKnight, you probably don't know him. He's a New Testament professor in Chicago, so he's a really, really smart man. And he has taught a class on Jesus for decades, for years. And I read this on a blog post of his. He does something really, really interesting the first day of class. For this class on Jesus. Here's what he does. He takes two surveys, and every student in the class, he gives two surveys, right? So they got two surveys sitting before them. Here's what the first survey does. The first survey will ask the student, what do they like? What do they dislike? What's their personality like? What do they believe in? What do they not believe in? I mean, it's like a personality test to get to know this student. That's the first survey. The second survey that Professor McKnight gives his students is the exact same survey, but he asks them to fill it out about Jesus. So it asks, okay, well, what do you think Jesus likes? What do you think Jesus dislikes? What do you think Jesus' personality was like? And on and on and on. Exact same survey, first about themselves, second about Jesus. The results that he gets apparently are absolutely astonishing. 90% of people, 90% of students, both surveys come back with the exact same answers. Meaning this: what they think about themselves is how they think about Jesus. So I haven't seen this test. I'm just going to make up examples. Presumably, if the student's a Republican, then they're going to think Jesus is going to be Republican. If they're a peacekeeper and they don't like conflict and everything, then they think that Jesus never rattled crowds. On and you go. You get the point. And here's why I bring this up this morning. I think a lot of us believe in a God who looks a lot like ourselves. We tend to develop a theology of God that looks a lot like ourselves. And it's interesting, the scriptures teach, right away, Genesis 1, that God has made us in his image, and I think we have an inclination to actually switch that, and we tend to make God in our image. A.W. Tozer is a really well-known pastor, writer in the 20th century. He's no longer living. He's got this famous phrase, and it's this: what comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. What comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about you. Put simply, your view of God, who you think God is, what you think he's like, what you think his purpose is, his desires, his personality, whatever, if he even exists, right? Maybe you're here today and you're like, I don't even know if God even exists. But whatever you believe about him will radically change your life. It is inevitable. Whatever you believe about God, and even if he doesn't exist, that will alter the way you live. And so the question becomes this: what is God like? What is God like? Seems like an incredibly simple question, but is actually highly, highly profound. And so because answering this question is so pivotal to the way that you and I live each day, we are starting a brand new series this morning, as you can tell, and it's called this: Jesus is. And you kind of fill in the blank there. Imagine an empty line. And so the next 2 months, here's what we're doing. There is this early biography of Jesus. It's called the Gospel of John. And what John does in his narrative is the way he constructs it is that he wants you to see who this Jesus is. Like, he wants to show you his personality, his identity, his character, everything about him. He zeroes in on that. And to do that, John has this repetitive theme. he gives 7 I am statements of Jesus. And so Jesus says things in this gospel like, I am the bread of life. I am the resurrection. I am the vine. I'm the good shepherd. I'm the gate. I am the light of the world. And as we're going to find out, those I am statements are really, really strategic and key to what he's saying. And here's what I want you to get right away as this morning's introduction. We're not even going to get into one of the I am statements, but what I want you to get is this. Who you think Jesus is, who you think God is going to color everything about you, about yourself, and about your family and this world. So, here's what we're going to do. Before we hop into John, I'm going to take a little detour. I'm going to take us to the Old Testament. Probably going to think, why is he doing this? Isn't this a series on John? I get it. This is an introduction. Hang with me. So, go to the second book of the Bible, the book of Exodus. The book of Exodus. And because San Bernardino County is in the orange tier now, we're going to use our orange-free Bibles underneath the chairs in front of you. So, hey, if you need a Bible, this is yours to take home. We will be reading out of this. I'm going to be on page 62 in the free orange Bible. And before we get to chapter 34, which is going to be kind of our main text this morning, I want to set the scene for you. This is really, really, really key. Here's what's going on. There's this guy named Moses. He's the leader of Israel. He's a huge prophet. And Moses is leading Israel. He's leading God's people through the desert, through the wilderness. And Moses, in chapter 33, comes up with a really, really big request. It's actually very bold. It's astonishing. And his request is this. He literally tells God that he wants to see him. Like he wants to see God. He wants to see his glory. He wants to learn his character. He wants to learn who God is. And the reason why Moses is asking this is because up to this time, Yahweh, the God of Israel, he's been making his presence known in a tent. The Old Testament, they call it a tabernacle. And so as Israel has been marching through the desert, this tent is what they follow. This tabernacle, and God's presence resides in it, and that's symbolized by clouds. And so Moses gets to the point where he's like, I'm not okay with that anymore. God, I want to see you. Like, I just don't want to see your presence in a tent. I want to see you. I want to see your glory. He's like, I want to see your face. And the problem with that, God graciously tells him, Moses, you can't see my face and live. So I'll show you as much of me as you can see. And that's what we go into. Exodus 33, verse 18. 33:18, here we go. Then Moses said, now show me your glory. And the Lord said, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. Verse 20. But he said, you cannot see my face, for no one can see me and live. And the Lord said, there's a place near me where you may stand on a rock. And when my glory passes by, I'm going to put you in a cleft of the rock, which means kind of like a crack, and cover you with my hand until I pass by. And then I'm going to remove my hand and you'll see my back. But my face must not be seen. Now, chapter 34, move into verse 4 there. So here's what Moses does. So Moses chiseled out 2 stone tablets. Think of Charlton Heston here, if you know who that is. And like the first ones, and Moses went up to Mount Sinai early in the morning as the Lord had commanded him. And he carried the 2 stone tablets in his hand. And then the Lord came down in the cloud, and he stood there with them, and he proclaimed his name, the Lord. And he passed in front of Moses, proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Earlier, exact same book. It's important we track with this. Don't turn there. Exodus 3:14 to be exact. Moses learns the name of God. We think God, like that's his name. No. The name of God is actually, it's kind of technical in Hebrew. It just means I am. Like God's saying, I am who I am going to be. And so he tells Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. Remember that phrase, I am. And what happens here now, chapters 33 and 34, Moses, he's learned God's name, and now 33 and 34, he's learning about God's character, his personality, what he's like. Remember, he says, God, show me your glory. Like, I want to see all of you. And Yahweh says, you can't see my face and live, so I'll show you a little bit of me. And this is like an epic interaction between Moses and God. We probably don't understand the gravity of it, but for first century Jews, like this passage that we just read, this interaction is huge. This is actually probably one of the most famous passages in the Old Testament. Some scholars actually argue that this passage, Exodus 34, is the most quoted passage in the Bible by the Bible. Meaning other biblical authors go back to Exodus 34 all the time. It's front and center in the Jewish mind. But the thing about this, if you didn't catch it, is Moses doesn't get his wish. Moses gets the backside of God, so to speak. Doesn't get his face because he says, you can't see me and live. All right. We had to do that background work. Hopefully you're with me. Exodus, Moses, asked to see God's glory, Mount Sinai. Take all of that. And now let's move to John, the book of John that we're going to be in for the next 2 months. John chapter 1, if you, Orange Bibles, page 723. 723. So this is the introduction this morning. And John 1 serves as an introduction to the book. It's a prologue, meaning it's a preface. It's an introduction. In John 1, what he's doing is he's getting us ready for the whole rest of the book. He's like, you got to read this first in order to understand where I'm going to take you. If you grew up in the church, you're probably familiar with these words. John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. Let me just give a quick summary of this. What John is doing here is he's basically going to tell us, hey, you know Jesus of Nazareth? Like, you know that human being, that Hebrew rabbi that goes village to village? Yeah, he's God. Just, not a big deal. It's a huge deal. And so when John uses the word, he is referring to Jesus of Nazareth, the human being. And he's saying this Jesus fully embodies God, like he's God in flesh. Now that's a crazy claim, and I don't have time to get into that and break that down, and you probably have a lot of questions. But that's actually not the point this morning. Here's the point this morning. Cruise up to verse 14. This is where things get going. Verse 14, John 1. The Word, right? This Word that was with God in the beginning, that is God, that made the world. He became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory. Underline that word if you're an underliner. The glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father full of grace and truth. Verse 16. Out of his fullness we've all received grace in place of grace already given. For the law was given through Moses. Remember Moses, Exodus 34, Mount Sinai? Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. And verse 18 is like the punch. No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father. He's made him known. Now, this isn't easy to pick up in English, right? And you have to know the Bible was written in a different language. The Old Testament was written in Hebrew, New Testament Greek. Those are dead languages. We don't speak them anymore. But when you kind of find out what's going on behind the scenes in this passage, man, this passage becomes that much more epic. And here's how it's epic. What John is doing in chapter 1, specifically verses 14 through 18, he's taking all the language, all the words, all the pictures, all the background of Exodus 34, of Moses being on Mount Sinai and seeing the glory of God as he passes by. John, he's taking his readers back to that. He's saying, hey, remember that story? And his audience was first century Jews, and they would have gotten it like this. Here's what John does, word by word. Verse 14, he says, he made his dwelling among us. Literally in Hebrew, what that means is he pitched his tent among us. Or he pitched his tabernacle among us. So remember Moses, Exodus 33-34, going through the desert. And I said that Yahweh, God, would reveal himself in a tent, in a tabernacle. It was like a mobile temple. What John is saying, he's saying, hey, remember that tent tabernacle? Yeah, Jesus is like that now. He's referencing Mount Sinai. Moses would meet God in a tent. And now John is saying, this word, this embodiment of God is tabernacling amongst us. He's ripping the language out of Exodus 34. Next, here's another clue. The word glory is used all throughout John 1. Glory, glory, glory. Glory in the scriptures means God's presence, his power, his beauty. What does Moses ask of God? Okay, my wife's listening to me. She usually listens to me. Anyone else? What does Moses ask in Exodus 34? Yes. Moses says, God, show me your glory. What John is saying, John 1, here's Jesus. You want to see God's glory? Here he is. All right, so we got the tabernacle thing, we got the glory thing. Maybe this is just by chance. Maybe we're just a little suspicious. All right, let's take this further. What is Exodus 34 all about? It's about Moses going up Mount Sinai, the 2 tablets, 10 commandments in his hand, right? We've seen the old movies. What words and phrases are used in verse 17? Moses, the law. He's reliving that story. He's talking about Moses receiving the law. Again, taking us back to Exodus 34. Here's the kicker. Here's the last thing I'll point out, and then we're going to get into what does this mean for us today. John 1:14 and 17 uses a phrase called grace and truth. Grace and truth. Now, a lot of people use that phrase today in the church talking about, hey, we need to be of grace, we need to be nice, but then we also need to speak the truth, right? That's kind of usually how you hear that talked about. And that's true. That's not what's going on here, though. That phrase, grace and truth, is the exact phrase used when Yahweh describes his character to Moses. But we miss it in translation from Hebrew to Greek to English. I know that's confusing. Don't worry about it. In Hebrew, in Exodus 34, when Yahweh says, I'm full of love and faithfulness, it's hesed and hemet. In English, it's grace and truth. Here's what John is doing. John is ripping all of the language and the story out of Exodus 34. Tabernacle, glory, Moses, law, love and faithfulness, grace and truth. And he's retelling that story around Jesus now. He's making the point. You want to see the Creator. You want to see Yahweh. You want to see the God who's made heaven and earth. Here he is in flesh, Jesus of Nazareth. Moses, God, show me your glory. John 1, here he is. You see that? This is what's going on here. This is so cool. This was shocking. This was scandalous. But the whole biblical story is like moving up to the climax of this point. And you got to remember, Moses never got his answer, right? Moses said, God, show me your glory. I want to see you. I want to see your face. And he said, you can't see my face. You can see my backside as I walk by you. What does verse 18 say? Let me read this for you. No one has ever seen God. Moses didn't see him. But the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made him known. Modern day paraphrase, the Message. I love how Eugene Peterson puts this. No one has ever seen God, not so much as a glimpse. This one-of-a-kind God expression who exists at the very heart of the Father, and I love this, has made him plain as day. Jesus makes God plain as day. This is what the story of the Scriptures has been waiting for. This is what Moses had wanted thousands of years earlier. And so what I want you to get this morning is this. You want to learn who God is. You want a clear vision and description of who He is. Look at Jesus. The good news of Jesus is this. You don't have to have a mountaintop experience of God to get to know Him. You just open up and read about Jesus. You don't need to play any guessing games about God, right? I mean, I've seen so many interviews. If you went through Alpha, it's actually a video at the beginning. They ask people, hey, what do you think God is like? And you hear all these different, this energy or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Oh, great. No. If you want to know what God is like, just look at Jesus. Jesus says later in the Gospel of John, He's like, if you want to see the Father, just look at me. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. What John wants us to see in his introduction, in his prologue, is that Jesus is God. Jesus is the full revelation of Yahweh, the God of Israel, the creator of the heavens and the earth. And here's what he's getting us ready for. John, throughout his gospel, is going to drop these lines of Jesus, where Jesus says, I'm the bread of life. I'm the light of the world. I'm the good shepherd. I'm the vine. I'm the resurrection. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. You know what he's doing there? Remember God's name? Exodus 3, he says, I am who I am. Jesus is saying, hey, I'm the great I am. He's giving you a crystal clear picture of who God is in flesh. Here's what I want to ask you this morning. It's just an introduction. We're just kind of whetting our appetite. Are you hungry? Are you thirsty for an interaction and an experience with God? It's a really easy response. Go to Jesus. He says he's the bread of life. He's the only one who's going to ultimately satisfy your hunger and your longing. Are you in a dark place right now? Go to God. which means go to Jesus because he says he's the light of the world. You want to experience a new life? You want to experience restoration? If you were here last week and you saw the baptisms, you want to experience that? Go to Jesus. He says, I'm the resurrection. Do you want to be protected and treated tenderly like a sheep is by their shepherd? Go to Jesus. He says he's the good shepherd. I was brought back this week. I remember my freshman year of college. I think it was Poli-Sci 101. I'm sitting in the very back of class, one of those small metal, tightly jammed like desks where you can barely fit like your notepad or your laptop on it, which I never understood. I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the projector screen, and I realize I can't read the notes. I'm like squinting. Man, what is going on here? And so I decide, okay, I'm going to go sit in the front, which if you're a college student, like you don't want to sit in the front, right? Like sleeping, all this other stuff. But okay, that's the only way I can do it to read the notes. And so I sleep in the front. I don't sleep in the front. Freudian slip there. Hey, don't laugh. You guys did the same thing. Turkeys. And I realized in that moment, yeah, that's an amen. I realized in that moment, oh my gosh, I need to go to the eye doctor. Go to the eye doctor, and sure enough, I don't have 20/20 vision. So I order glasses, get contacts. I usually wear contacts. And I put them on, and then I go outside, and I was like, man, I'm seeing like a whole other world out there. This is HD, plasma, LCD, 4K. I've heard there's like 8K now, whatever this stuff is. I'm just like, whoa. Here's what I learned. My eyesight was actually bad for a couple years. I didn't know it. And then I realized, whoa, hold on here. My batting average, my junior and senior year of high school, it went down. I had this huge, I couldn't hit a curveball. If you know baseball, the way that you read a curveball as a hitter is you see the red threads rotating in a certain way, and it signifies, okay, curveball, I'm gonna hold back on it. I couldn't see that. And now I'm like, oh, I had vision problems. I wanted to go back to my coach, my team, and say, hey guys, it wasn't my fault, okay? They wouldn't believe me. And I also realized now with these glasses and contacts, and I would be driving. This is pre-iPhone, pre-maps, all right? You guys remember that thing called MapQuest? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, my mom's not here. My mom still uses MapQuest today, I think. If you're watching online, I'm sorry, Mom. I remember I would be driving, and I'd almost have to get up to the intersection to be able to read the sign on the street to know when to turn right? And I'm looking at the piece of paper, MapQuest. Yeah, it was really dangerous. And I realized, okay, now I got my glasses, my contacts in, I can see like 100 yards out. I don't have to do that anymore. What I realized, my vision was off for a long time, and now I'm seeing things clearly for how they are. Here's my hunch this morning, brothers and sisters. I think some of us, our spiritual vision is off. You think you have a clear picture of God, but really, you've actually been looking through foggy, distorted, scratched up lens, and you don't even know it. Maybe your vision needs to be corrected spiritually, so to speak, and you don't even know it. I mean, you're just used to seeing this way. And so the question becomes, okay, how do I put on these spiritual glasses, so to speak, Mark? How do I correct my vision of God, so to speak? You just take a long, hard stare at Jesus. This is cheesy, but Jesus provides 20/20 vision of what God looks like. Looking at Jesus, in a lot of ways, I think is like putting glasses on and then looking at him, and all of a sudden, you have a clear HD vision of what God is really like. And what that does is it changes the way not only you see God, but the way you see yourself, the way you see your family, the way you see this world when you're looking through the lens of Jesus at what reality really looks like. And so if you're here and you're new to Jesus, you got questions about him, you're a skeptic, you're still figuring out this whole Jesus thing, I think one of the best things that you can do, especially for the next 2 months, is spend each day and read 1 or 2 chapters of John. Just read 1 or 2 chapters of John. Because what John does is he says, I'm going to show you who God is. Look at Jesus. See, if you want a correct vision of God, you can see the Father through the lens of Jesus. That's what he does. Now, if you're here and you've been at church for a long time, you've had these spiritual glasses on for like a long time, decades, 40, 50, 60 years. And I don't mean this in an offensive way, but maybe you think you have God figured out. You think you know what he looks like. And I'd be willing to bet, because this is true of me, it may be that your glasses, they're fogged up. There's scratches on them. They're distorted, right? To use the whole eye analogy thing, like you may need your vision corrected. Or like during COVID-19 times, right? People with glasses, the struggle's real. The fog from the mask to the glasses. If that's you, you know what I'm getting about. You may not realize your spiritual vision is off because you're just used to seeing reality distorted. Let me give a couple examples of this. Some of us grew up with a really unhealthy father figure. You could have been abused in a number of different ways, spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, physically. And so when you understand and you look at God as Father, your understanding of fatherhood is very distorted. And it's not your fault. Maybe you grew up in a family that was very strict, legalistic. There was no grace, no sensitivity. And so you can't understand this thing about God being a God of grace and love and forgiveness because that's not what you encountered. That's not what you saw growing up. Maybe you grew up, this was me, in a church environment where they talked about knowing God. Theology was robust, sophisticated, technical. And they knew a lot about God, but man, they had no vision of what it looked like to actually experience and encounter him. Yeah, my's right. That's what I said in my 20s when I had a whole encounter with God. I said, well, I missed this for 25 years. And the thing is, you've never tasted Jesus as the bread of life. The psalmist says, taste and see that the Lord is good. Just don't look at him and kind of as like a lecture and learn about him. No, experience, encounter the God of the universe. Last thing, maybe the longings and the heartaches of life have come your way and they've left scratches and doubts on your glasses. And you actually doubt and question that God is who he actually says he is. And that's okay. The invitation of John, the invitation for the next 2 months, is to put on a pair of glasses and to see the Father through the lens of Jesus. And things come into focus. I'm going to invite the band back up. And go into a time of response as usual. We'll have some of our shepherding elders, Pastor Dan, the prayer team come forward. Here's what I want to leave you with. How do you see God? Seems like a very, very basic, simple question. But how do you see God? I think a lot of us actually see God through a different lens, through a lens of whatever our politics are, our family background, our personality. Remember those 2 surveys from Scott McKnight. 90% of people see God the way that they think of themselves. How do you see him? How can Jesus correct your interpretation? Did you know that in John 1, in the original language, it says that Jesus interprets God? Isn't that fascinating? So, a couple scenarios here. Maybe you're here and you don't have the faintest picture of who God is, and you're like, whoa, God, things are fuzzy for you. You haven't given your life to Jesus before. And the minute that you accept Jesus into your life, things get clear. I want to extend that invitation to you this morning. And maybe you're here and you've been following God your whole life, but something needs to be corrected. There's something in the way of you clearly seeing the Father. We would love for you to come forward to receive prayer. But we just want to bless what God is already doing. We want us to all see clearly. I need to see clearly. And so we just want to invite you forward for prayer wherever you are. And the band's going to lead us in 2 songs. Let me say a quick prayer for us. Holy Spirit, give us a clear picture of you this morning. Undo all of the garbage, the baggage, the sin that distorts our relationship with you. I pray, God, that we walk out of here this morning, not just with knowledge, but an actual encounter with the God of the universe, you. And we see you afresh for who you are. And so, Lord, we ask, just like Moses, show us your glory. God, show us your glory. May that be our prayer.